Our final speaker for the day is AJ Jacobs. I met AJ, he probably doesn't remember that, maybe over 10 years ago when I was summoned from the audience in an event he was hosting to compete with him on who can chew a baby carrot for the longest time without swallowing. In his attempt to break the Guinness record for this particular thing. This is just one of many things that he does because AJ took on himself to become a living experiment. He does what most scientists want, to try things without any repercussions. He does it because he tries it on himself. He has numerous books where he takes on an experiment, like living for a year according to the laws of the Bible, trying to live in a different environment, trying to take on all the puzzles you can take. And recently, he's been living according to the US Constitution. He's going to tell us about that after we summarize his life in the following way. There once was a writer named AJ, who lived life in a curious way. From the Bible to health, he sought wisdom and wealth, and learned something new every day.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I'm honored to be the final speaker in this. What a great day. Thank you, Lita. Thank you, Moran. That was excellent. So I am here. I'm the final 0.2 miles in this marathon. As ChatGPT said, my name is AJ Jacobs, and I am a writer. And my favorite technique as a writer is what you might call method writing, which is sort of like method acting, but for less conventionally attractive people. And method writing means, to me, it means immersing myself in my topics, just living them, walking the walk, talking the talk. Hence the tricorn hat that I have here that I will get to in a moment. But first, let me explain that my previous book that I wrote several years ago was called The Year of Living Biblically. And that book came about because I grew up in a very secular home. Very little religion. As I say in the book, I'm Jewish, but I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian. So, no offense to the Olive Garden. But I wanted to learn about my heritage, about the Bible. And as I say, I like to learn by diving in. So I thought I would spend a year trying to follow the Bible as literally as possible. And that meant following the 10 Commandments. And it meant loving my neighbor. It meant being fruitful and multiplying. And I was fruitful. I did multiply during that year. So I really commit to my books. But in addition to the famous rules, I wanted to follow the less famous rules. The Bible has hundreds of them. It says that you should not shave the corners of your beard. I didn't know where the corners were, so I just let the whole thing grow. And there I am at the end with some serious topiary on my chin. It's sort of Gandalf or ZZ Top, whatever is your age. And there I am in Times Square. Full disclosure, that sheep was a rental sheep. That was not part, but for the cover I rented it. But I did walk around wearing a robe and with my beard. The Hebrew Scriptures, it also says to stone adulterers. And so I did that. I used very small stones, so no one got grievously injured. And it was a fascinating year. It was sometimes ridiculous, often perhaps ridiculous, but also often sublime. And I learned so much. And one of the key issues that I wanted to investigate was how literally should we take the Bible in the 21st century? How much should we look for the Bible's original meaning, and how much should the meaning evolve? And I found that there are biblical principles that stand the test of time. Love your neighbor, the golden rule, gratitude, forgiveness. These are good things. But I also found that the application of these high-level principles has to evolve as our values progress, as we realize that being gay is not a sin, as we realize that women are equal citizens. There needs to be some stretch in interpreting the Bible, some elasticity. We cannot be fundamentalist and obsessed with the original meaning. Now, when I wrote that book, this was many years ago, I always thought I could do a sequel about the Constitution because the exact same issues arise when we talk about the Constitution. And about 2 years ago was when I decided now is the time to do the Year of Living Constitutionally. Because as you might remember, 2 years ago or so was when the balance of the Supreme Court tipped towards originalism. 5 of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court claimed to be constitutional originalists of some sort. Originalism, as you probably know, excuse me, is the idea that when you interpret the Constitution, you should look at what the words meant when it was ratified 238 years ago, or when the amendment was ratified. That's the most important thing to an originalist. So this is the same issue as the Bible. How much should the meaning be frozen in time? How much should it evolve? And this question, which is grappled with by the Supreme Court, it has a huge impact on how we live our lives, every one of us. It has an impact on what we can say, what we can publish, gun laws, women's rights, women's reproductive rights, religion, college admissions, whether we are going to have a monarch in the White House. So as a writer, I pledged to be the ultimate originalist and try to follow the Constitution using the technology and mindset of when it was written in 1787. So that meant for a very interesting and a very bizarre year. It meant that I got myself a musket. I went on ye old internet and bought a flintlock musket, and because that was the gun of choice in the 1780s. And I exercised my Second Amendment right to bear my musket on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where I live, which got some strange looks. I will say it came in handy one time, which was at this coffee shop, actually. I came in at the same time as another guy, and he said, "You go first." I'm not arguing. So in addition to the musket, I wrote the book with a quill pen. That was me shooting. Because that's what the First Amendment meant in 1789. It meant, it did not mean social media or retweeting. It meant writing pamphlets with a quill pen. So that's what I did. And I will tell you, writing with a quill pen does have its benefits because it changed the way my brain worked. I was writing, I was offline. There were no dings or baldness cure ads to distract me, and I could think more deeply. I tried to follow the Third Amendment, of course. I quartered a soldier in my New York City apartment, and I asked him to leave, because that's part of the Third Amendment. I attempted to express my constitutional right to be a pirate. This is actually in the Constitution. You can apply to Congress to be a privateer, which is officially a government-sanctioned pirate. So I met with Congressman Rocada from California and asked him for a letter of marque and reprisal. At first, he was very enthusiastic, and then he said, "Wait, what's a letter of marque and reprisal?" And I explained, "Well, I'm going to take my friend's water skiing boat, and I'm going to go out on the high seas." And he's like, "Yeah, maybe not." So, but it's still being discussed in Congress, or so his aide tells me. I am here. Here I am. This is my right to petition in the First Amendment. Petition government for redress of grievances, and I brought my petition to right here to Washington, and I met with Senator Ron Wyden, and I expressed my freedom of speech and when I talked to the press, and here I am chopping wood, which is not really in the Constitution, but I was trying to get into the mindset by doing 18th century activities. I rode my horse around Manhattan. And again, as with the Bible, it was a fascinating year. It was bizarre, My wife did not love everything. She didn't love the smell of beef fat candles. She didn't love the ink stains all over, the soldier hanging out at our apartment. But it also had a serious point, this project, because for me it was a crash course in the Constitution. And I talked to dozens of amazing constitutional scholars. I read shelves of books, and I was trying to figure out, how should we treat this 238-year-old document? What are the pros and cons of originalism versus the other main method, which is living constitutionalism? And it's a nuanced, complex topic. I don't have all the answers, but in the end, I come to believe that we do need to have some flexibility in how we interpret the Constitution. Like with the Bible, there are some timeless principles in the Constitution. Values like liberty, equality, freedom. These are timeless. But it's important to remember that the expression of these principles, they need to evolve. Our rights need to expand as our conception of humanity expands, as we recognize that women and gay people and black and brown people deserve these rights. The Constitution must evolve to include them. So the Constitution, I say, it can't be like a pair of skinny jeans that burst as soon as you gain a couple of pounds. It has to be more elastic, a pair of pants with elasticity. The 1780s was a very different time, and it is important to reject the blinkered parts of that century. At the same time, I'll end with this, we should not throw out the baby with the cold, dirty 18th century bathwater. There are values from the 18th century that are worth revisiting. The idea of civic virtue, I love that. Or the idea of a duty to your community. And finally, the idea of cakes. And that is how I will end. One of my favorite parts of this whole project was bringing back the 18th century tradition of election cakes. Because when America began, voting was not seen as this annoying chore. It was an amazing new right, with the big asterisk that not everyone had this right. So for the minority that did have this right, it was gobsmacked. It was just mind-blowing. Thousands of years of being ruled by kings. And now we have a right to choose our representatives. So it was a celebration. It was a festival. There was music, there were parades, there were picnics, and there was cake. Huge election cakes people would bake. 14 pounds of sugar. One of the recipes called for 14 pounds of sugar. They had figs and cloves. Not my taste. So I thought, let's bring back the election cake. We don't need the figs. But let's remind ourselves, democracy is sweet, and we have to fight to keep democracy because it is fragile. So last November, oh, that's me in my... here's the cakes. So last November, I got people in all 50 states to bake cakes and bring them to the polls or just to their office or to their family and serve them. And it was a surprisingly emotional I got the most wonderful emails from people who said, it's such a relentlessly negative time in politics. This is just a reminder of the positivity, this idea that democracy can be sweet. There are actual studies that show if you make elections more festive, you increase turnout. And we can look at Australia, where they have democracy sausage. They went with sausage, not cakes. I'm a vegetarian, so it doesn't appeal to me, but election day there is a big barbecue. So I'm doing it again with my wife in November. If there are any bakers in the audience who want to come bake for democracy, because I do believe cake can be a gateway carb. It's not going to solve all our problems of democracy, but it's going to help us engage and fix the real problems like gerrymandering, the Electoral College, other huge threats to democracy. Because clearly, democracy today, it's far from perfect, but our job as Americans is to strive to make it, as the Constitution says, more perfect. So I will end with that. Huzzah for cake, huzzah for democracy, huzzah for PopTech. Thank you.